From a superficial viewpoint, rooting for an overpowered character is some of the most pleasurable and nihilistically rewarding experiences when watching an anime. And it triggers, in my mind, the hype versus content ratio. Because while at first feeling really badass watching essentially our buddy kick Major Keister, that feeling can deteriorate in one of three ways. Firstly, it's not all too common, unfortunately, that their strength doesn't make sense in their setting, being that either they're inexplicably more powerful than they should be, or this is the first time they're using an attack, so therefore its destructive force somehow far surpasses every future instance of said attack. Secondly, it's just not done meaningfully, because even if having a guy that rightfully should be able to destroy a nation by pissing on it, either it'll feel repetitive if this is done too much throughout, or we just won't feel anything towards that character. And thirdly, if the guy is overpowered because of either luck, or the power of friendship, or something else that he doesn't rightfully deserve. I'm proud to talk about an anime that doesn't suffer from these three flaws, that no one is really crediting enough for how amazingly Seven Deadly Sins recruited a cast of overpowered characters, how it didn't fall into any of these three fatal categories, and how it piqued my inner hypometer so much just being a freaking fun anime. I almost felt like Swag Kage jerking off to Madara's meteors. This is the third video in this mini-series I recently started on analyzing overpowered characters on how they were done right, or unfortunately wrong, and I got a lot of positive feedback from my last one analyzing Meruem, so thanks for that. Today I'll be covering the epic integration and accumulation of the overpowered main cast in the Seven Deadly Sins, especially focusing on Meliodas, and how it isn't just well-written protagonist being an overpowered bitch flicker. No, it's an invigorating breath of fresh air as far as being a living paradox to our slightly stale shonen formula. So feel free to like and subscribe, that would be awesome, and let me know in the comments if you like this series and want more. The way the Seven Deadly Sins narrative is played out is these guys are supposed to be unjustly wanted, extremely powerful badasses. And being that the story begins focusing on characters that have already lived lives of legend, from the get-go, it shatters the questionability behind if they're rightfully power scaled. These guys are supposed to be hella strong, and aside from all that, it immediately wrecks the shonen mold, which plays underdeveloped characters to its strength, building them up with some sort of backstory to hook you in, so that you can watch them progress at life and relate and whatever. But in this scenario, the Seven Deadly Sins teeter on the edge, with characters that are each individually proper endgame protagonists in their own right. Most overpowered characters that I feature in this series, this is episode 3, are in the complete opposite situation. Here, they are rightfully powerful with feats that are justified. The question here mainly falls to, can these guys actually pull off a not repetitive, exhilarating, and emotional shonen story? The short answer is yes, they can. The long answer is, this is how. The narrative is written so nicely just by how the creator of the Seven Deadly Sins played around with character perspective in a setting where he abolished any form of redundancy. The story starts focused on Meliodas in his bar doing whatever until Elizabeth walks in. In your usual anime, the protagonist is the first character to develop a personality in the eyes of the viewers, and that was clearly Meliodas, giving him the all too prestigious MC slot right off the bat. But then when Elizabeth is introduced, the story continues from her perspective. It's an interesting phenomenon that I didn't realize until researching for this video, but despite me visualizing Meliodas as the face of the Seven Deadly Sins anime and as its protagonist, the anime gives you the perspective from Elizabeth's mind, dropping us into a situation where we never actually know what our alleged main character Meliodas is thinking or feeling in any scenario. It also isn't long in the series until we are introduced to the darkness that clouds Meliodas' mind. Now, being that we're seeing from the vantage point of a character that isn't overpowered, at least at that point, by any stretch of the imagination, it remains as an extra hype, as a bit of a boost to what I'm about to express. This different perspective, aside from just making everything all the more badass, it also serves to annul a little anime disease that I hate that I like to call brachitosis. Brachitosis, for those of you who don't know, is an anime illness that usually plagues support characters, where they have to point out every little detail of what our main characters are doing for the viewers, because they think we're as dumb as Logan Paul fans. The name of this disease was derived from Brock himself, as seen here.
No, not yet, Gastrodon.
Is he?
Of course, Paul's strategy is to pull off Gastrodon at the last minute so that Water Pulse will land directly on Star Raptor.
Grab him by the horns! Oh no!
They stopped Tauros in its tracks!
But we don't get any of that, just because of the perspective this anime dropped us in. As much as I love all that though, it doesn't solve the redundancy issue I briefly mentioned, because once we have an overpowered character in the beginning, it's really fun to see him barrel through his adversaries. There's definitely a point though where it becomes too much of a good thing. I don't mean to nitpick, but I did feel like Overlord was slightly getting to that point after the Clementine arc in season 1, but it has since then recovered, and I would love to feature Einzulgaun in a future episode of this Overpowered analysis series. Let me know in the comments if you're interested. The 7 Deadly Sins series does not run into this problem simply because its creator constantly tricks you in giving you scenarios where the sins are clearly overpowered, rightfully overpowered, and overpowered in a sense that doesn't fluctuate all that much to the whims of an individual story arc. And that was by constantly throwing novelty at you in a fashion most other anime do not pull off. Zeroing in on Meliodas, and by the mere first episode alone, his secret ability is revealed. Unlike most other anime where it takes 2-3 fights, he is no mere little pervert. He's...
and a big word.
And believe it or not, I'm only half kidding. The first actions we see from the fellow implies a fascinating paradox. He's supposedly the sin of wrath, yet he's a calm, complacent, give no fucks character. And by the way, I'm pretty sure that this is the first time I've ever used that mega perverted character trait we all know and love as a testament to awesome character writing. Never thought I'd live to see the day. But in this case, it was a brilliant move getting this paradox across with one simple character trait, getting the fanbase immediately interested into what will become of Meliodas. Immediately curious into what his past is and into what his future will hold, this contradiction puts a layer of depth on an otherwise bland, seemingly overpowered protagonist. That would seem to just serve the purpose of being cool. But in the fashion Meliodas battles against himself, in part cures the series redundancy issue as well. Our first battle is Meliodas versus Twigo. Twigo likely being the most brilliantly written character of all time. A character so brilliant, it's as if the brilliance was passed down the Armstrong line for generations. Yeah, that was slightly sarcastic because he's basically a dumber version of Alex Louis Armstrong. And Meliodas, of course, decimates him instantly with his full counter. At this point in the series, you don't know any form of limit to this guy's power. We just see that it's a force to be reckoned with, and this guy is as overpowered as he needs to be. Also, let's call a spade a spade. It felt undeniably awesome. Like the vibe any overpowered character should try to emulate. Our second battle was against Gilthunder, a far more powerful Holy Knight than even the mighty Sir Twigo-sama himself. But before their battle, all the writing that went into Gilthunder was he's in a complete other league. While Twigo appeared for his battle, and immediately when he noticed he was up against Meliodas, he freaking lost his shit, which revealed him to knowingly stand no chance against our leprechaun-looking boy. Gilthunder, on the other hand, was written as a character chasing the sins, and before their encounter, he had his quick exchange with Meliodas with the lightning javelin thingy, revealing far more of a threat in the nonchalant way he brushed off Meliodas' counterattack. So when he squared off against Meliodas, especially with him grabbing the upper hand immediately with lightning prison jutsu thingy, we were in a complete novel situation. Watching Meliodas obliterate him further cemented Meli as a badass overpowered character without suffering any form of redundancy, because watching the battle, we had no idea what the outcome would be, despite having seen Meliodas wreck Twigo an episode earlier. And yet, he was somehow affected by something that rendered him injured from that battle. Also brilliantly written in a fashion that now we know he's not completely invincible, yet this was clearly not purely done by Gilthunder, and he retains his overpowered badass status. In the Bast dungeon arc, new mysterious powers are revealed, and that obviously holds our interest, but it's not like base form Meliodas lost his glamour, not in the slightest. It's not like now we saw Goku version 17, so now Goku version 1 through 16 basically will not do anything for the rest of the series. Nope, plain old Meliodas still one-shot his enemies normally, retaining being a OP MC, but again, in a completely fresh setting we haven't seen before. And I need not bore you with the details of this throughout every single battle in the entire series, but every single fight and every single arc feels just as fresh. It was only in retrospect that I actually realized this, because without thinking, I knew I was having a great time, but with minor thinking, I was like, hey, wait a second, so Meliodas one-shot Twigo, Meliodas one-shot Gilthunder, and Meliodas one-shot creepy mask abs dude. Why am I liking this? And this is why. Because none of that felt the same at all. And in a completely different vibe from One Punch Man, but Saitama will be an entry on this series in the future. But altogether, at least as far as season 1, which broke the ice to the greater series, it served the major purpose of giving you the most enjoyable watch you've experienced in a while. It doesn't go the relatable underdog route, and it doesn't go down the brilliant, deeper, meaning emotional route. The emotional moments and backstories that are present in the series serve the purpose to make you love the characters all the more, giving you the adrenaline kick in the balls, watching them successfully get from point A to point B. Meliodas here isn't your average shonen bitch MC, and that's plain and obvious. And the manga reveals later one of the most tragic protag backstories I've ever witnessed. And still, the anime does an extremely incredible job getting you to love this overpowered, passive-aggressive, hilarious son of a bitch without needing to rely on a tearjerker, making his backstory's revelation later all the more prominent and powerful. Hopefully I'm not too late now to quell the army of comments reminding me not to go off topic, since I'm supposedly analyzing Meliodas as an overpowered character, not a shonen protagonist, but the aspect of his writing that drew him and endeared him to you and made him a lovable little badass was his great personality and his amazing writing as an overpowered character that everyone just wants to get more of, because despite the norm, the back and forth writing in this series keeps the formula from getting stale, as I've expressed. And if you pay attention, like I only actually did at the start of writing this script, when I was wondering how I love Meliodas as an overpowered character, but I don't find him to have a fault to the vast majority, this is what you get. Because if you look at Kirito, an overpowered protagonist that everyone seems to kind of love making fun of for like the last 5 years and counting. Thanks, Mother's Basement. And now I'm not going to be getting into a hate rant or anything like that on Kirito. In fact, I intend to do one of these overpowered analysis videos on the little bastard eventually, because despite of the SAO haters, people still love Kirito as a character, and I intend to express what they did right with him. And while all of Mother's Basement's points against the series are at least semi-valid, the series still has many fans, and I will get to why in a later date. My point here, while Kirito is built as an escapist fantasy overpowered character, Meliodas isn't. And as far as an overpowered main character, that's hard to find. And while there's a lot of redundancy in Kirito's journey, where he essentially beats everyone, and with many of those victories being very similar and the structure of those arcs almost identical, Meliodas' overpowered awesomeness is based on a great personality despite being done almost as right as an overpowered protagonist can be done, similar to how Kirito in Sword Art Online Abridged doesn't have many of the writing issues that Kirito from Sword Art Online proper possesses. Meliodas isn't to take his place escapist character. That's an important detail. You're watching Meliodas' journey through Elizabeth's eyes, as I've mentioned, and that's why the perspective that we were given matters all the more. Without relying initially on a grim backstory, Meliodas still remains as one of the most hype, fun shonen protagonists I've seen to date. And with the backstory he's hit with later, doubles him as a tragically deep MC as well. And I deeply believe that this wonderful result was achieved due to starting off strong as an overpowered protagonist done right to grab everyone's attention. He triggered the hype factor phenomenally, and he caused his character's development to be timed perfectly. And this makes Meliodas, at least in my opinion, one of the greatest overpowered shonen protagonists of all time. Coming next on this series probably is an overpowered analysis on an overpowered support cast done right. Next time I'll be covering the genius writing of the remainder of the 7 deadly sins and how they bring the world to life. So feel free to subscribe and hit that bell to know when it comes out. And in the meantime, feel free to enjoy the rest of my channel that's somehow teetering on the awkward border of parody and analyzing the genius of anime. Also, YouTube did this new thing with the sub boxes, so if you aren't getting notifications for my video, go check it out. It might be set as filtered by highlights instead of filtered by new content. God knows why they did that. Probably for the same reason they nuked my last 7 Deadly Sins video that I am still pissed about. Anyway, love all of you. Thanks for the support and have yourself a most wonderful evening.